right? It's your transfer of fear. And I think that there's a lot of fear to like hold space for like, you know, maybe like a feminine energy, or like a, you know, for everybody, not just for men, because I think with that comes it comes the moon, it comes the like, you have to look within, right? With that energy, everything is like the within, right? So everything going inward. And I think there's a lot of fear to face that part of ourselves, which we all have half of.
Hey, welcome back to Song Doctor Sunday. Today, I'm very excited because my art crush is gonna be here. Yara Travieso is, I've known her since the freshman year of high school, actually the summer before high school. That was 2000, 2001. What's up, Yara? Go ahead and request join whenever you're ready. But Yara is an amazing artist and activist and film director and writer and choreographer and many, many other things. But I have been just watching her evolve in the most incredible way over the last 20-something years. Is that how long? And I've got a lot of questions. I was journaling about it with my candle earlier. What's up, girl?
Hi!
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. Wow. Hopi!
I know. I was just putting it together in my journal. I was like, since 2001.
2001!
It's amazing.
Oh,
I have
man.
2 very special memories of you that I wanted to share first. So, your very first performance I ever saw was, I think it was the like final performance before even school started for the summer, and you made a trio with 2 other guy dancers, and you had a rose in your mouth and they carried you away at the end. I just remember thinking, whoever that girl is, she went all the way. Respect. Respect. And then
that's amazing. That's amazing. I really have a foggy memory of so many things that happened like all those years. I'm glad other people continuously remind me.
I think you make a much bigger impression than you realize.
I have like I remember everything from my childhood, but I have incredibly bad short-term memory. I think from the years of not sleeping so much. I sleep a lot now, but I spent so many years not sleeping that my friends are continuously being like, okay, I know you don't remember this, but this one time.
Ooh, tell me about this. Okay, so I've noticed an energetic glow up from you. And I've noticed it maybe in the last 3 years. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I feel like
I feel like a lot of us are kind of going through this, right? Like transformation or transition.
But I think like artists, and I are not all of them, but I feel like you found an interesting place where you're tying in activism, and I think you always have, but I think it's becoming a little bit more like kind of solidified or something with how you're using it in your work. And I don't know, the visual I get, because it's hard for me to describe, but it's almost like your core is filling in and then your energy is emanating further. And that's just my observation of watching. But I've just been watching like Yada's energetic glow up, and I'm like,
that's
so doing that. What is that? Therapy? Is that sleep? What's that?
I've actually been feeling the same way about you, and a lot about like the women and like the non-binary and the queer people, like everyone that is in my community. Like I've been seeing this like shift into a different space, and I think it's like, for me, it's been the shift from trying to survive and sort of lean into like the built environment, the systems and structures, and trying to survive within the built environment, to not caring about the built environment anymore, and instead of the job being to survive, the job has been to excavate truth, to like continuously be in truth. And when I'm in that space, then all of a sudden everything else falls away, right? So everything's so much clearer, you know. And I think that practice is a major shift, and it really has shifted my work, everything I do, how I interact with myself. So I think that's the thing. That's the thing that's been shifting.
But that's not a free journey. Like, I think anyone who's gone through something like that knows how much effort it takes to make like even this much progress, it feels like, in like spiritual realms, which
Yes.
everything kind of emanates from there. I like what you said about excavating truth, because like I was talking about excavating when I'm talking about the creative process with my students. I'm always like, we're not reaching, we're excavating.
Yeah.
And it's also a much more sustainable process.
And now when I think about it, it's also not like a forceful thing. Like, it's not pushing something into place or like making something happen. It's more of a like digging to find like the information, and then it'll like, it's more of a momentum thing, right? So it's like excavating, digging, and then finding like the water, right? And then surrendering to that water that you excavated. So I think that there is something that isn't forceful. It's not like muscle, right? It's more like gravity and bone when it comes to a creative process. And I think that it takes muscle, it takes some effort, but I think the effort doesn't come from spaces of fear, right? And I think that's like the biggest thing, right? So like reacting to fear versus reacting to truth. Yeah.
There's so much in that. I was like, what thread do I even pull?
There's so many threads to pull.
Man. Well, I guess, so let me go back to just blew my mind. It's fine. Forgot everything else. Okay. This was my next question in my thing, but I feel like it'll just get me back on track. So I have always wondered with, part of me kind of watching, especially the shift in the last year of quarantine, really kind of observing big waves of, I can't even process it completely yet, but is like seeing how, and a lot of my community are artists or healers, so that's just like who I'm acquainted with, is seeing how people respond to the call, because not everybody is, and I guess everyone has a different time. And in my mind, I keep asking, like, well, what's the job of the artist? And like, what's the moral responsibility of the artist? Is there a moral responsibility of an artist? I remember last time I saw you in Brooklyn, you said to me, to be alive is to be political. And I like couldn't understand what that meant at the time.
See, I don't feel that way anymore.
You don't feel that way anymore?
No.
Okay. Talk to me about that.
I think like, and I love that the like continuous change. My primo saying hi, I love you, Dieguito, I love you. So I don't feel, I think I'm gonna keep changing, and I think that's something that's so important, and to like not only talk about how we continuously change, because I think there has to be room for that, right? Like the room for the continuous evolution. Desarrollo in Spanish, desarrollo means like development. My friend Paola texted me the other day. She's like, how do I say desarrollo in English? There's no like word that has the same impact. And it's true. It's like desarrollo is like this like unfolding. Oh, unfolding would have been good. But it's this kind of like, it's like this unraveling, unfolding growth, right? And I think that like being very present and honest about all of that is really great. I think that you know, I did a lot of activist work for a while, and what I understood even in myself is that actually for me, I'm more interested in community work. I'm more interested in building new pathways. I'm more interested in creating spaces outside the built environment, right? So worlds and pathways and communities that interact in dynamics that we haven't seen before, or our bodies maybe haven't experienced, to rewire something within us, to show every part of ourselves, not just our minds, not just our bodies, but show every part of ourselves that there is another way, that another way is possible. And I think that I can't do that alone. And the best way of seeing that is in community. So whether that's like on set for a film or in rehearsals, right now we haven't been able to be in a theater rehearsing, or on set, and films have been very restricted and very limited. However, that practice of like community building, right, through this kind of new pathways of communication, this kind of like restructuring of our hierarchies, right, maybe non-hierarchical structures, and really sort of like having a more fluid way into collaborations and creations with people has been really important in cementing the priorities of like, you know, of how important it is to like create new worlds and new ways of being, not only for the individual to understand that it is possible, but also because the more we do that, the more they become part of our practices, our daily practices. And I think maybe last year when I said that, I was probably really entrenched. It's true, to be alive, there is an aspect of being alive, you sort of are entrenched in the political, because I think that there is, I don't agree that that's like the statement I would say today. Like I would probably say is to be alive is to be alive. but really like the idea of truth just keeps coming back to me. And this I'm also really interested in like, because I think oftentimes we can get lost in the spiritual, or lost in only the art, or lost in only the political, or lost in only, and so I think it's about sort of practicing and like working out so that you have more room to hold more and more and more of like our humanness and our spiritualness, like not that one is better than the other. Again, like this sort of idea of hierarchies as well, like the invisible world is just as important as the physical world for me, and in my work too, and in my scripts. So I think that sort of like giving weight and power to the physical, the invisible, the psychological, right, the conceptual, like all of it has like a holistic way into it. So I think it's all about I think that's one thing in my work, it's always been about complexity.
Yeah,
it's always been oh, was I supposed to, something came up, ask me about the video.
oh, you're good. Maybe someone requested join.
Okay.
Maybe. But okay, many things.
I know, I tend to do that. I go like that.
I like it. We're very much on the same page, but I have similar questions. First of all, I want to see when your company, like the Yara company, to create these practices that create the new world, because like I remember being, when I was performing a lot and other people's productions and all this stuff, I just remember feeling very much like it's not going to change. Like as long as we're working like this, it's like pushing against. And I remember feeling that way when I was a late teenager. I went through a phase of being very politically active in certain ways, but I also got to the same conclusion where I was like, the fight is rigged in their favor. I will never win this fight. Like, and it's kind of like this saying came to me, which is maybe the wrong saying, but they say something like, if you wrestle with pigs, you'll end up being dragged through the mud or something like that. And I was like, it's just not going to work. Like I can, because I have this ability to focus a lot of energy and like do that thing. And I know that's a thing I can do, but it becomes very, like, I feel like you do it enough times in your life and you're like, okay, this is a misuse of that energy. And it's like actually just exciting the people that I'm trying to like defeat.
Interesting.
Because they're like pleased by how upset I'm getting, and like how and they kind of know that it's rigged in their favor, so it's a joke to them, and then it's like makes me feel embarrassed and not
right.
And
no, that's so that's interesting.
So part of it is like, I guess the conclusion I've come to now, which is quite vapid, is like you just need to make a shit ton of money and then put your money where you want to see it, because people respond to money. And that's my current, like,
right.
After all of this spiritual work, I'm like, okay, give me money. Because like the more money I have, the more I can hire the people that I just agree with, bar none. But I'm like, your philosophy is exactly what I want to see. Here's the money, go make your own work. Because a lot of what I saw in, I feel like I've been through many phases, but the phase of like being in people's experimental operas and stuff like that is like, it was a lot of, first of all, kind of abuse on the parts of the performers who were, you know, everyone is not getting paid for the most part. Like everyone is working grueling schedules, but it's also some of the psychological abuse that comes with that kind of weird hierarchy that's created, that I know that you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But also a lot of what I found is like a lot of white women getting grant opportunities to tell the stories of Black and brown people. It's super fucked up. It's just like super fucked up. And I was like, wait, if this is what we care about, then why don't you just give the microphone to the person whose story it is?
And it's so, you can't, it's like so taboo to even say. And so, I don't know, I left performing for a long time, actually, because I was really confused. I was very confused because I was like, if the point is to lift voices that have not been heard, and that's the whole kind of ecosystem of the experimental world, then I don't know, like, then that how I'm interacting right now is not helpful. And I know I can be helpful, but however it's been set up, like, either way that I interact with it is like not right and feels icky. And so what does that mean? And so I just kind of like made my own studio and went there. But you know, that can be quite isolating too. And I don't know that that's the answer. One more thought I had from what you were saying is that, like, I remember I visited the Yale Library one time and they were telling me the story behind some of the paintings on the wall and stuff. And there's like kind of like the goddess of wisdom, and she's holding a staff in one hand and then a sphere in the other. And the guide told me, they were like, actually the sphere is representative of knowledge. And that like stuck in my brain for some reason, because I was like, that makes so much sense to me, the way that I learn things. I never learn things in like a pyramid structure like people talk about education. Here's the foundation of knowledge, and then you grow on the foundation. That's never true for me. It's like this weird sphere where it's like all of a sudden you learn one new thing that makes everything that you thought was a foundation defunct, and then it all shifts and your like sphere opens.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's kind of an image that's always in my head and what you were just talking about.
Yes, and I like that, and I think that is like the always leaving room for me. It's like that's what I want, and that's what I want in my creative process. It's like I want to leave so much room so that everything changes, right? And that's kind of like those, like, doing away with any kind of fixed idea. That's been a really important thing for me. Like doing away with any kind of fixed idea, knowing what is true for me in this moment, but knowing also that there's more perspective that I'm gonna keep gaining. And then as far as your like what you were talking about, you leaving the performance world, and also feeling like you were just, you know, hitting a wall continuously, I really relate to that. And so one thing that I keep thinking about is, well, one thing I will say about your own practice and this idea of uplifting voices that haven't been seen, I really feel like obviously we need to uplift underrepresented voices. And I think I also teach now. I've been teaching a lot more during the pandemic, and I've been doing a lot of lectures. And I think something that I keep finding myself speaking on is, more than anything, like if each person were to really do the work of speaking their truth, and not just like the truth that the commercial media wants to see, the sort of like the patriarchal hero's journey truth.
Which is so hard to detangle from.
Yes, it's really but like as soon as you do, it's so hard to go back. That's that's the good part though, because as soon as you do, it's really hard to go back. I always talk about narrative structures and how I really want to fuck up all kinds of narrative structures, but like how narrative structure has been really modeled after like a male orgasm, right? So you have like the exposition, you have the climax, and then you have the resolution, and then you have this kind of like this mountain that also mirrors like you're born, you live, you die, right? So it's all kind of anchored in these parentheses of birth and death. And I think, you know, I know I don't experience time in this way. I know my body doesn't experience time in this way. I know that my body bleeds every 23 days. I know that even within the cycle of my body bleeding, there's still a tiny cycle in there where like the blood changes colors every day. I know that like for me, like the idea of like an orgasm is not like this, but it's more like this, right? And it's not even about the climax, right? It's just about this other experience. So thinking about space and time and how my body processes the world, and really kind of being very true to that structure that will continuously change. I think that's more exciting. And so, yes, it is about uplifting underrepresented voices, but it's also about embracing your truth. I get a lot of white, straight men's scripts asking me, hey, so I made the main character a woman. Can you tell me if she's a strong female dimensional character? And I always get back to them with, tell your story. Like, not the hero's journey story, tell your story. Tell your story, because actually, like, I don't really want to talk to men like you, because I'm not interested in that. I want to talk about all the stuff I still don't know. There's so many stories here that are, you know, coming out. but tell your story. And so to that, I would say, just excavate your truth, like excavate the layers. And it doesn't even have to be within like this time in this body. It could have been like an ancestral thing, or it could be like a future thing, but like tell your, and that it feels so good, because also when we're in that space, we become less in the effort space, and things just to start to fall easier into place. It's just an easier creative process, and we're not suffering the whole time.
That must have taken a lot to get to, though, because even when I'm thinking about my own experience and attempting to keep coming back to that, like keep coming back to, and by the way, the tagline for Sanctuary Studios is "Tell Your Story," which is my company.
Oh, nice.
So I love that. That's all. It's also been my kind of current conclusion, which is like, that's all we have. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And I say also your story, not in like this like in like the literal way, right? But it's
right.
like
that's true.
Like the like, I keep thinking of invisible stories. For me, like a lot of my work is about the invisible world that I am continuously connected to, but have never really been allowed to talk about because it's so weird.
That's interesting, because you do not come from a long line of like spiritual practitioners.
Well, you know, I'm Caribbean, I'm Cuban Venezuelan, and all the women and men, a lot of the men in my family, like my grandfather was really, really intensely Catholic, like old school, but it almost was like an OCD Catholic. So for him, the Bible provided a set of rules and regulations that allowed him to not like go insane. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what kept him in this kind of place, which, you know, it disconnected him from all of us. He wasn't connected to us. But then the women in my family, both my Cuban grandmother and my Venezuelan grandmother, were very spiritual. My mother spiritual, but none of them in like this kind of strict religious space. Yeah. Much more connected to practices and rituals and kind of like energetic understanding. And yes, a lot of it came, like my Cuban grandmother would do a lot of Santeria practices, but also Catholic practices. So like in the garage, she had her Santeria. In the kitchen, she had her Catholic santos. It was really like the stereotype of, you know, the white Cuban old woman that like is ashamed of, you know. So so I think that in a lot of ways, yes, I have both my grandmothers always with me, like these two necklaces, and I think that like I did really take on a lot of that energy, but my mother is like that as well, and my tia, like I have that. It's very much in like a Latin American house, like you often have that, but I think I'm lucky because I also have a lot of artists in my family. So, you know, religion wasn't this fixed idea, but it was almost like another form of storytelling, another form of art, and another invisible world to sort of like look into and tap into that will give you more information about where you're at. And I think that was a really beautiful thing in thinking of like these spiritual practices, the way I think of myth and demystifying a lot of these things, but also like grabbing onto some of them. And I think that's been really special. And of course we have like historically in Latin American literature, we have magical realism, which is something I grew up with, not just in literature, but in the stories that my mother would tell, you know, like she would make up crazy stories and pretend like they were true. And we just like, okay, sure, that happened. And like, they were so insane. But that was this kind of like the mundane was this kind of like magical space. And so like, you know, a plate would break and Abuela would be like, look, it broke in the shape of, you know, Mary, like, and then she would hang it up and would glue it. And actually it looked like a vagina. But like, you know what I mean? Like it was all these like noticing of all these things that I think if you grow up in that space, then yes, it's like, yes, this is the world that's always surrounding you and you're making these connections. I think, and to that, if you have like, because I have a really strong connection to that, it really allows, it sort of like validates a lot of the other invisible stuff that maybe we're not talking about, that maybe isn't spiritual, but maybe is a feeling like this doesn't feel right, you know, or this feels heavy, like things that are more invisible, that are maybe like somatic, maybe in my body, or like something in the back of my head, like a memory, you know? And so it sort of like gives me permission to allow those things to also be really true in their own way. And then so validating all these experiences that we can't see in the physical space, but we can feel, we can sense, has been really important in a lot of this work, in a lot of my creative practice, but my human practice. I mean, for me, I'm not an artist first. I'm really just existing. And then like, you know, my artwork comes from the existing. But to your point also of like, I took a break too from all the things. So like in 2019, I decided to take a year off and just like literally just heal, do a lot of work, because I was stuck in the cycle of the built environment and what the built environment was asking me to create versus what my body wanted to create. And I'm still in that shift. I'm sort of like finishing this big transition, but I've made that decision because one, that idea that you were talking about, you keep pushing up against these systems and structures that not only don't listen, which I think is one of the biggest traumas your body can experience, where you're yelling something and the person doesn't listen, right? But they're built to do that, right? So it's like, it's not even tipped in their favor. It's that it's functioning exactly the way it's supposed to. And I think that is like the radical part, right? Where it's like when we can accept that these built institutions or the built environment this is what it's built to do, because it comes, and it's not from like a place of like, because yes, I have rage, but like, it's more like, oh, I accept that this is built to do right? And it's doing that. And these spaces created certain wounds. And for me to go back to these spaces and be like, heal them. It's like if like, it's like if you have a partner, if you have an abusive partner and your partner has been abusing you forever, and then you keep going back to your abusive partner because you need to feel safe. And so you keep going back to them. And it's like, that is going to dig deeper into that wound, right? And so we've all been there, you know, and also this idea of like, I think also America has a really deep codependent relationship with these systems and structures and the binary. And it's like codependent the way that you're in a relationship where it's codependent, right? Where you think you need it. And even me, like I still have, even like where I try daily to like practice, like really being outside of any kind of imposed system, I still know that my body is still in a codependent relationship with these systems and structures, right? This idea of like what success is, or what a woman is, or what, you know, all these things. And so if I think of it as like a codependent abusive relationship, then it's easier for me to accept, oh, okay, this built environment is not actually here, right? Like the systems and structures are not here to see me in my fullness, right? But it doesn't mean that I now have to like fall apart and be like, it's impossible, it's over, because I had that, I did that, I let that happen. And now we can then like, because it's a mourning, right? So when you accept the death of something, right? The death of an expectation, the death of what you thought this could be. When we can accept that and almost like do a ritual, mourn what you thought the built environment or like the systems and structures were going to do for you, and realizing that actually that's not what they're there for. When you can mourn that and accept that fully, then it's almost like you can build way more space and more room to then create new pathways and new spaces of how to create. I'm in that space right now. I'm in that transitional space where I'm like going through the breakup, right? I've been going through the breakup for a couple of years of the built environment, and I'm transitioning into not being in a codependent relationship with the systems and structures, and transitioning into right, the void of like, what else could it be like, right? How else could we be like? How else could she be like? And so transitioning to that, and I've been lucky enough to have like amazing community and people in my life, even if it's just one, sometimes, you know, it doesn't have to be a big group, just one person, you know, for a few months that really like builds, and then another one, and then another one. And then my body just finds this community to really help push those new narratives, those new spaces, those new ways of existing forward, and really like cemented in my body that it is possible. A new pathway is real, and it is possible because I've seen it. I've seen it in my body. I've seen it in groups in my communities, and I know it's possible, and I know it's real. And so it's really just about the like consistent practice of trusting that. And it's hard. It's really hard work, but it's real, and you know, I feel it. I feel a deep transition. It's also moving from a space of fear, right? Because oftentimes these kinds of systems and structures are just fear based. They're all fear based, and they just put their fear on you know, on others, right? On the other specifically. And then so oftentimes it's like that fear based work, you know, like recognizing that a lot of the work has been fear based, has been responding to fear. And so as opposed to responding to fear, it's like now responding to another space, which is like, again, going back to the truth, this idea of truth. Or not even responding to truth, just like allowing ourselves to be vessels of that truth.
I definitely agree. So what I hear though is that ultimately it's the practices of self-trust, because here's what I see, and it's a very dangerous transition we have too. It's very exciting and there's a lot of freedom, but I think what I see happening is like, as we become a little bit more open to the idea of like the spiritual world and like opening, it's almost become, I see it becoming commodified too, where like, this is a multi-layered response I'm about to have, but I'll have people come to me and be like, oh, I found someone who's going to read my Akashic records and stuff like that. I'm like, girl, that's not, everyone has access to the Akashic records. You don't need to pay someone. I mean, you can if you choose, but like, just things becoming commodified in that way where I'm like, that's not the point. The point is like self-trust, self-alignment. You have access to everything. Everything is yours, but with great freedom comes great responsibility, which I feel like is being kind of shirked, you know, and it's easy to do because it's like, I think the goal and the joy of being like, oh, to reach that place where I could like, it like, we kind of hold on to that image, not realizing that like, you better get ready for like so many dark nights of the soul, because you don't just like free pass access that. That's like, I guess the way I think of it is like the amount of self-honesty you have to reach a place energetically where you can access that is brutal. Like it's not free. And Carolyn Mace, who's a woman that I read her books a lot, she has this image of like a multi-story building to kind of talk about the energetics of it. And she's like, to live on the first floor of a building doesn't cost you very much, but then you're also kind of constantly berated by other people's energy and loud and you know all this, but it's not that expensive. But each floor that you move up is going to cost you more. But what you get once you get to there, you know, if you have like the top penthouse view with like the beautiful view of the city and everything is serene and quiet up there, that cost you, that wasn't free. So I think that's something that like, as I'm kind of observing the shift, and it like my own personal story is quite entangled in this because my parents were match married in a religious cult, which I don't know a ton of people know, but that's like
I know that.
And they're both like super intelligent people who, there was this whole movement in the 70s and the 60s where people were like, they grew up with in the 50s with that kind of a structure, and they were like, that doesn't work, that's rotten from the inside, so what do we do? And they were I think longing for freedom and longing for truth, not realizing that there are other, you know, a lot of Eastern religions came here and were like, oh no, we're the answer, and live in communal housing, which they did. You give up all your possessions, you live in communal housing, you work menial jobs and labor to like fundraise for the church or whatever organization it is. And while I can see that a lot of very intelligent, very well-meaning people did that, it's also just one more way to look for structures that tell you, are you a good girl? Are you a bad girl? And you, like, are you spiritually correct or not? And here are the steps towards spiritual correctness. And I just feel like we're at another dangerous point where that same thing can happen in a different way, where it's like, unless you've purchased these spiritual services. And people don't see it. They don't see it. And I'm like, I think I was like born with cult colored glasses just from like how I came, how I was birthed into this earth.
Well, you know, that's real. And I really see it often in like sort of like white spirituality too, that really freaks me out. It's this avoidance of the mess. And I actually had a friend, a very spiritual friend. I was trying to like evolve our relationship, our friendship, so it would become more of a different dynamic. And then it became a very complicated conversation because it became, well, I don't have so much pain like you do. Like my life is good. And then I really sat with me a lot, because I do sit with a lot of pain often. Since I was little, actually, I cried so much. I felt so much pain and rage since I was little. And I think, I wasn't really allowed to process it in the world, because the world doesn't really allow women and young girls to process a lot of that stuff, the anger part, right? And I think I had so much of that in my body, and I already knew, like, this is something that I needed to hold space for, and like speak with and process and know where it comes from and research. And I think that there is like I keep thinking about patriarchal structures being scared of fear, right? So patriarchy is fearful of fear. They're so fearful of fear, like these structures are so fearful of fear that they will do anything in their power to not feel fear, including literally oppressing, killing, erasing, shutting down people that remind them of their fear, right? So, I think so much about Latin American women and femicide, and I often think about, what is this? Like, right? What is this? What is actually happening here?
Right.
Like, what is it? And even like walking down the street, and how like my body, like this kind of catcalling, like, what is this? And I started experimenting different things to say to men as they would catcall me. And, I first started being funny, because I tend to deal with some things with humor. And so like sometimes they would get catcalled, and I was living in Puerto Rico for a while, and I would say, "Eso no se hace aquí." Like, we don't do that here. Like, we don't do that. Like, I meant in my body, but also like an old grandmother that was like, "You don't do that in my house." Like, take off those dirty shoes. You don't wear those in this house. You know what I mean? Like, thinking about it like that, you don't do that in this house. And it was funny, but also it took a lot of my energy to like get to that funny place. And then I started thinking, I was like, oh, you know what this is? This is your transfer of fear onto my body. So you don't have to feel it, right? It's your transfer of fear. And I think that there's a lot of fear to like hold space for like, maybe like a feminine energy, or like a, for everybody, not just for men, because I think with that comes the moon, it comes the, like, you have to look within, right? With that energy, everything is like the within, right? So everything going inward. And I think there's a lot of fear to face that part of ourselves, which we all have half of, or part of. I mean, I'm not here for the binary. I don't, that does not exist. But this idea of this energy that we've been excluding, right?
Yeah, it's the narratives too, like you were talking about, because as you were telling your story of like, when I was little, I felt so much pain. I remember feeling that way too, or anger. I was super angry little kid.
Yeah.
Furious little kid. And I remember like thinking in my mind, like, oh, I'm the man. And part of that was I grew up actually the early part of my life without a dad, because my dad left very early. But I remember thinking about me and my family. I was like, I'm the man. Even though I had an older brother who was very sensitive and soft, and like I would defend him, and I would tuck him in at night because he was scared of the dark. And like, even in playground and stuff like that, like when there was playing house, I'd be like, I'm the dad. I play dad. But already so young, it's like, oh, these feelings of like defending people, that's masculine, so I'm a man. Instead of like, you embody so many things, and you are ultimately trying to balance out a structure that has nothing to do with, like you said, binary. But because there was no like,
there was
kind of have these
in the world that was showing you anything else. But I do kind of like the idea of like, baby Hope, like as a drag king, like being like, I'm a man. Like, part of me just wants to see that. But yes,
all of the photos of me when I'm little are like defending my mom against the camera. So it's just like, I think I felt her sense of like isolation and fear very young. So it's just like 2-year-old me like defending my mom and glaring at the camera like, fuck you, get the fuck away from her.
So interesting.
But that feeling kind of never left in general.
Yeah, I feel that. I really feel that. Wow. I mean, I think it's so wild, because I have a very similar like protective relationship with my mom, and like my sister as well. So I think that's really interesting. But I think that like, I just keep going back to this idea of like these fear-based structures, like, right? And so it's like they're all created, like, I really do think that what you were saying, like we avoid the darkness, right? We avoid this sort of like, not the darkness, I hate that word,
The
but
responsibility, almost. I feel like it's the not latching on to someone, you know, because it's almost like we trade in one system that doesn't work for someone else's new system. But it's kind of like the waiting for, like, who's going to come up with a new system that I can then understand when I'm right and when I'm wrong and when I'm good and when I'm bad, instead of having to hold the cognitive dissonance of like, it's that complex that no one else can tell you. And there is no relief of like, oh, someone saved me with their new narrative. Like, I didn't like the old one, but now here's the new one coming in on a gilded carriage or whatever.
You know what, though? I've been learning so much teaching, like, it's been amazing, because this is something that I'm really like, you know, we talk about like rethinking everything. Oh, and then all of a sudden everything's different, and then rethinking it, and then rethinking it. And that is super healing, because then you trust, like, if you experience that enough times where you see something differently and it's like a whole part of your body opens up and you're like, oh my God, there's this whole part of my body that just woke up. And now this is also true. And then all of a sudden there's one other way of seeing everything. And then that's also true. And I've been lucky, really lucky enough to have that experience over and over with my students, where I can literally enter their universes. Like, a lot of the work I do with my students is I ask them to tell me who they are, because I'm like, I'm exploring your planet. Like, tell me what the oxygen's like here, so I could really like understand your way of thinking. And it's actually something that I want. Like, I really, and as a director, this is also something that I love doing, is like, what is this? What is happening here? Like, tell me, like, take me through it. Hold my hand and explain to me what this is. And this is how I do it with my stories too. Like, it's like, what is this planet? Even though it's coming from me, I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, show me what this is. And like allowing myself to continuously, like, I want to be surprised, you know? And that's a space where I can surrender fully and be like, I don't know. And in a lot of parts of my life, I'm not able to do that, because there's a lot of like trying to control, you know, so many things. Actually, I'm not like that anymore. Like, I feel like I've surrendered to so many things in my life at this point. But the best practice I've been able to do it in is like being an educator right now has been so powerful. Obviously being an artist, but more than anything, I think in the pandemic, I really sort of was privileged enough to have, you know, like a continuous, you know, teaching job. And so being an educator has been really important for me, in that I get to experience new universes over and over and over, and continuously see everything from a different way. And that, I think, is building new pathways, right? Because it's like asking, you know, like, I'm here to be your teacher, but it's like, I'm actually just here to like create a space and be a witness, right? I want to be a witness to the way you see your truth. And then maybe if you hear somebody else's truth, it'll also give you more information, right? So it becomes more like of a space to us, like, witness each other. And I think that's how I think of the camera as well. Like, I often think of the camera as my witness, right? Witness to this script, or witness to this person, more than anything else, right? Like, it is a witness to experience something and to pronounce, almost like a ritual, to pronounce this as a truth.
We will figure this out.
Yay! I think it might be my internet, but I got off the Wi-Fi, so let's see if it works better now.
Okay. So,
yeah, Belinda's amazing. Belinda's also an artist, performer. Well, you could just talk about who you are. I don't know.
Well, I'm a performing artist and choreographer, but right now I'm kind of like switching gear and like redirecting my focus and researching on building something that use pleasure and joy as a radical act to heal the feminine. And, you know, hopefully, like, with this movement, like, everybody collectively can move towards a radical collective healing. So that's something that I'm building on.
Belinda is incredible, amazing artist and human and person. So I'm really excited about this new space that she's entering. But also, can we look at the outfit, because it's so good?
Yeah, I want to watch.
Stand up.
I'm wearing this like I'm your hottest girlfriend pantsuit situation.
I love it. I love the double buttons too. It's cute.
Thank you.
It looks so good. I love you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
gotta
thank you
go, but hope to connect with you soon, sooner than later.
Yeah. You
But let us
next
hear
on
your
this.
music. I played it for B.
Hell yeah.
Is it the Avenue D?
No. I'll send it to you again.
It's a different.
I sent it to you a while ago.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Nice to meet
Have a
you.
good one. Bye.
Okay, so hopefully I won't get kicked off.
But you've always lived with amazing artists. Like
Yes.
you've always created your own community in that way too, just in like the actual physical space.
I have an amazing apartment in Brooklyn, and I've been able to stay here, and I've been able to also like harness different humans in this space to like create. I also have a backyard, so like we use the space like as a place to create, to make art, to have parties, a lot of parties that we haven't had a party in a while, but we will. And I think that's been really important. Also, you know, I think if I'm going to live in New York, I have to have these kinds of spaces, because it's a really crazy place. It's a crazy place, you know.
I feel like I'm moving back to the East Coast in July 1st.
What? I didn't know that.
I got into Princeton for my PhD. So I'm going.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited. It's awesome because it's a very loose program. They basically just give you resources and tell you to do whatever you're going to do.
That's
like,
I'm so excited for you.
so I'm looking right now actually for like kind of a farmhouse type thing that I can rent while I'm there, because I want to create like an artist collective. I want to live there by myself, but I want people to come do projects with me and have a place to stay that really feels like a residency. So that's my current project.
I'll have my ears open. If I hear anything, I will let you know.
Well, you'll be invited too.
Yes.
Wherever I'm trying to manifest it to myself. I'm doing a lot of meditation. I think the biggest thing, and this is interesting, and when you kind of decide, okay, I want more than what I'm currently allowing myself. It's like a scary place to go. You kind of need guides, because it's weird. You're like, I think this is all. I know that this is not all that there is, but I don't know what the block is. And usually it's just that you think you're not allowed, but it's very challenging to like break that, like I'm allowed to have what I desire.
Yeah. It's complicated also when you're like when your daily practice is like really moving away from these kinds of patriarchal capitalist structures, and you're like, wait, I don't want to like lean into this idea of like what, you know, I don't believe in upward ladders. Like, I think that's just like a myth. And I really believe in like an every direction expansion. And if I'm being honest to the way that the universe works, right, and like this kind of like we're continuously expanding, then like that I can get like that my body gets, right? But if I think of it as like the patriarchy or capitalist ladder, that doesn't help me. Like that freaks me the fuck out. Get out of here.
It's rejected on a cellular level.
No, it's like that gives me panic, right? That gives me panic. For me, it's like about the like every even the dimensions that I'm not in touch with expanding continuously, right? So that I can lean into and I can think on. And also whenever I have voices that are, I'm going through this right now, so I'm here with you. But whenever I have voices that are continuously being like, who do you think you are? What are you talking about? You know, then I tend to say, oh, okay, who put that in there? You know, and it's most likely, again, the same person or the same structures that made that ladder, right? So yesterday I had this huge, I did this meditation because I'm embarking on a couple of big projects, and I took, I didn't just take the pandemic year, you know, to like be with a lot of stuff, but the year before that, I took a year off to be with a lot of stuff. And so I think that going back into these bigger productions that I was doing continuously without stopping, is bringing up a lot of things. But one of the things that it was bringing up was those voices that are continuously telling you, like, you can't do it, or if you do it, it's always going to be within these systems and structures that are harmful. And so what I had to do yesterday was being really honest with my body, where I realized how angry I was that my body was really still functioning within these systems and structures. And I just I was angry, and I just like decided to break a bunch of stuff. Like I organized things I wanted to break. And like I just very well planned like tantrum that I wanted to throw. I was like, and now I will throw a tantrum. And that's just me though, because I know that since I was young, like that, you know, like that wasn't allowed. And I know now that sometimes, you know, there's a little child in me that needs to be really angry and break some things. And I actually practice this with my niece all the time. She's taught me so much. I'm learning so much from my niece. I'm learning so much from teaching for my students. I'm really learning so much of like, oh, okay, I get to see things very differently now. And so, you know, that was really helpful to let that out and then be like, okay, now there's more room again, right? There's more room for a new pathway, a new way of thinking of this, a new way of experiencing this. But, you know, I feel you. There's so much noise. There's so much noise that I personally, my body, my brain, my mind, my soul, every part of me has ingested, that has told me. I mean, I was in the film space for so long, and that space was, and in the dance space, now I'm a director, but I used to be a dancer. And so like those spaces really went into myself, like really the abuse and the way that I was experiencing, you know, creative practices in those spaces.
So deep.
Were so toxic, and they still are. So the job now is like not to go to those spaces for, you know, for the healing, right? But like really just to remind yourself, like I accept that you are not able to give me what I need, and then really come back home, right, to do whatever I need to do to be honest and truthful to myself and to the work that I'm creating. But it is an insane amount of work. It is an insane amount of work, and it's a lot of like, this isn't mine, this is yours. This is continuously like, oh my God. And so like going back to like the catcalling, you know, we were talking about catcalling and how, like this is such a transfer of energy, of fear that isn't mine. And that's where I started to change what I would say, where I wasn't saying anything to them. I would just tell my body, this isn't yours, don't take it, leave it with them. And so it stopped being about, what do I say to these? And I was, you know, doing or saying things like that, like this to me just for walking down the street. And it became very clear that it needed to be something that I needed to tell myself. Yeah.
Wow.
My phone, we're 19%.
Oh, okay. Well, we can wrap up soon. I mean, there's like, I feel like this is like an endless, this should be just like a weekly show, just like the Yara and Hope show.
This sounds nice.
Man, well, I guess so. My part of my mission and like it's developing as I figure out things, and also being an educator over the pandemic has been so eye-opening,
right?
And all of the ways that we talk about, like, you know, part of my decision, I said earlier that it was like vapid, that I just want cash, and that's like kind of true, but it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. But I think part of that is,
but
like,
that's honestly
I mean, part of that I think is like, definitely there's an aspect of community because it doesn't happen without that, but about like, how do we keep our own resources as people, instead of like kind of begging for resources from people, like you said, who can't give you, who kind of like tease, but then you'll never have it, you know. They're like, oh, if you win at this thing, and then if you win this thing, then you'll, and I'm like, okay, I've been playing this game for like 25 years now and I haven't won, but I've done all these things that you said I would win if I did. So like, cash, this system runs off of like, you need a certain amount to like, unless you just like completely live off of the grid, which I've chosen as not the option for me. It's not luring to me. Like, so where was I going with this?
Living off the money,
cash, making your own income. Like so in trying to create my own business of kinds, so I think of community, but then I also think of like business, and I think of, because I need some of the practical things to be there for me to be able to sustain it, because I was like a starving artist for so long, and it forced me into well, maybe not forced. I was much more allured by codependent relationships when I was just like couldn't eat.
Right.
And
that's so real.
It's real. So part of me being able to hold my sovereignty is being able to pay for my own shit and like have my own house and have my own, so that it's less tempting to fall into those relationships. So that's pretty like a new revelation to me. But in part of that, I've had to learn a lot of these like business marketing skills that you learn as an independent person. And a lot of them are super gross and are like, you know, they like, one of the things that's been happening recently is they're like, okay, who's your target audience? Like, who are you talking to? All this stuff. And I'm just like, I just don't, that question is wrong. That's the wrong question.
Right.
And going through all of those like workbooks and stuff to like find your target audience to blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Like, my target audience is me. I am the target audience. It's me and me. And like, ultimately that feeds the community, but that's the only person I can answer to. That's the only person that I can like have some kind of like sovereignty with or over or whatever. And then in doing that, I was like, well, really I'm speaking to not the me now. A lot of what I'm doing in my current life is speaking to like 13-year-old Hope, because that was like a pivotal point for me where you're like kind of coming into what they call womanhood in the decision of the world right now, what womanhood is. And like all of these things are starting to shift around what your role is expected to be and how you're expected to behave. And it's always there, but there's like a definite shift, I think, in your like preteen world. So I'm like, well, a lot of the work I'm doing, even as an educator, is like things I wish 13-year-old Hope knew, like knowing what I know now or looking into the future in different ways. So is there, having like had that giant backstory of why I kind of talk to my 13-year-old self, if you, Yara, were speaking to your 13-year-old self as like kind of parting bits of wisdom to you as younger you, who is your market audience, then what do you think you would say? I mean, I know that's a big...
Oh my goodness. So one thing for me, I think everyone's different, but like for me, like most of us, like it's sort of like, for me, that stresses me out as well. Something that I've found incredibly important for my process, if we're talking about like our art practices and how, you know, we work within our art practices, something that has actually been really helpful for me has been really putting so much more weight on I know people say this all the time, but it's different now how I feel about it. The process where, for example, so I think for a long time I was hustling, and you know that, like I was just like, you know, like professional grant writer over here. Like I was just not sleeping. I mean, I think I spent probably 15 years of my life sleeping 4 hours max a night. And I think, you know, that took a toll on my body, my mind in a lot of ways. And I had no other option but to stop doing that. Like it was ugly. I had to stop. And so what now is happening, because I had that big shift, and for me, I had to really understand for what my body, like how my body responded to, like what it responded to. And so something that I've noticed is that I, like you, like maybe, you know, maybe someone needs like a certain amount of money in their bank account to then be able to like I personally need a home. Like I need to always have a space, but I also need to have community. Like that for me is like more than seeing like the money in my bank account, which I think is really valid. But for me, I need to continuously have community and like a space where I can rest, right? Or space to rest and community. And because what I've understood about what I'm actually in love with, what I'm actually in love with is not the final product. Like I've understood that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not actually in love with like when it's done. What I'm actually always craving is that moment that is incredibly present, not by myself. That incredibly that moment that you're extremely present with a bunch of other people, that then makes that present feeling even louder. And then all of a sudden you're in that space of like channeling, right? And like you are just creating, you know, the story or the work. And it is in this kind of weird space where like everybody in the space is like in that same present space. And that is, and we may not be able to get that all the time because especially on a film set, you're on the go. But if you have the right kind of team and the right kind of community, that moment comes to life. And that moment is so regenerative because it might create the perfect shot, it might not, but it doesn't matter, because what we fueled in that space will keep me going for like a year. And so I realized that that is so important. Even now, writing a terrifying script I have to write, I was talking to an amazing friend of mine. He's a playwright. He's like my dad's age. He's like one of the most healing friendships I have, because he's like a Puerto Rican playwright that's my dad's age. And he is just like, we can just talk for hours like friends, and it's amazing. And I love my dad too, but this is like a friend, you know? So it's like an interesting way to have this kind of dynamic. And something we were talking about was like, what if our script is the work? What if this sentence was the work, right? So like, this is it, right? This moment is the work. And so like, that's been really helpful for me. That's been like my safety, right? That's been the space where I can then like fully like open and let go, and allow my body to like process whatever or say whatever it needs to say. And I do think that there needs to be a certain amount of stability, right? But I'm lucky because I grew up in a home of artists, and it was terrifying, like all the time. Like we didn't know when the money was coming in. Like, you know, my dad worked out of the garage, and he was like a freelance rendering artist for architects. He was an architect, but he was a rendering artist. And we never knew when the money was coming in, and that kind of fear. But something that I will say that was great was that my dad was not affected by it. He was like, it's gonna come.
You want to hear a really beautiful memory I have of you and your dad? It was in high school, and he was dropping you off. I think it was like freshman year, and there was a homeless guy sitting by the building, and he goes, "That man is free."
That sounds like my dad. That I would have issue with, but that is my father, 100%.
I knew what he meant though, and I was like,
right, yeah. I'm like, Papi, okay, like, you know, like relax, Papi, relax. Everyone calm down over here.
Everyone calm down.
But yes, that is 100% my dad, for better, for worse, right? Because sometimes and it's like in that space, he exists only in this kind of idea in the mind, but like isn't in the physical always. And like, yeah, pero like, you know, maybe there's some policy and systems and structures that we really need to reform. But yeah, exactly. And I think that for better, for worse, that kind of way of looking at stability gave me a lot of panic and anxiety, which is real. But at the same time, it also gave me a different way of perspective of thinking of scarcity versus abundance, right? So like, you know, it's like that continuous back and forth, and not to like, I don't ignore when I'm anxious about, you know, these things. I really, really embrace them, and I really listen to them, and I sit with them, and I really take care of them, and I do something about it. But I think for me, I understood what I needed, right, to feel free. And for me, it wasn't necessarily like a bank account that was like increasing. For me, it was, maybe it will become that. I think I keep changing too, but right now it's a home, and it's a place to rest, and it's a community that continuously helps me rethink, relook, and be right, and be present. And I think that's like a safe community. And I think that's been really powerful for me. And I still I'm still understanding my relationship with money, because I have so much.
I think it's very similar. Like when you're talking about community, I kind of see it in the same way, where I think the ways that I engaged with community before was very much like extremely codependent, where I was like, whatever you need, I'll do. And then I don't have anything left at the end of the day, but I also didn't get paid. And then I'm resentful, and then I'm sick, and then, you know, all this stuff.
Right.
So I just kind of had to like,
Right.
Okay, I'm going to build this structure, but this is how much it costs to engage. And whether that's energetically, this is how much it costs, which is like, if you start sassing to me, you're not invited back, because I'm not going to, you know, like you were saying, like, that's yours, that's not mine. Like,
but right. But then it's also
I think,
like for me, like, I just like, it's like those, like, I come together, but I know I need, like, this is what I come back to. So like, it's definitely not like a I feel you. It's like a very aware thing. Like, am I becoming like attached now, or am I allowing myself to like share time and space, right? And again, I keep thinking of visiting another universe, and that's helped me a lot. Like when I'm around people, like a way that I can not enmesh myself with their narrative, because as women, we're really like trained into like this kind of enmeshment, is to really see them as a separate universe or a galaxy. And I'm like, oh, interesting. It's like, okay, now I gotta go to my galaxy because it's gonna be a long way back, you know, like, so like I think of it that way, and that's actually really helped me, like, you know.
I love that. So usually I say at this point, like, share your work, but I feel like people will find you. And I feel like Yada's one of those people where like, she'll find you. Don't find her, she'll find you.
But like my website, the thing is, I have such a badass website, and no one looks at websites anymore. But it's
Tell
so
us about
pretty.
your website. Everyone go visit her website. What is it?
It's, if you do want it, like everyone's like, where do I see your work? I'm like, yo, it's like I have a cute little website. Like just go to the website. Yeah, it's just my name. It's just my name. So
I'm gonna type it in the chat for anyone. Yada.
Richard. Hi, Richard.
.com.
Yeah. Yeah, just go to that. Yeah, just go to that. And there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I haven't put up, but it doesn't matter. Really, nothing really.
There'll be more. People will be aware of you. You're on the radar. Do you have a call to action for artists who are?
Ay, Dios mío. I didn't think about it. I don't. I want to say I don't have a call to action because I think everyone's going through their own process and their own. I think a lot of people are, you know, in it right now, and I think gentleness is very important because I think a lot of incredible information comes out when we're gentle with ourselves. So I think gentleness is very powerful. Yeah, and like everybody is a different galaxy, so like and we're always expanding in every direction. So I don't know if I have like a call to action because I think we're so inundated with so much. I can't even look at, I had to take some time off from news and social media because I'm so overwhelmed. But yeah, I think gentleness, that's all I can say right now. I don't have like a specific call to action.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate
you.
I know you too. I'm so proud of you. I think what you're doing, I'm going to get emotional, is so meaningful.
Hope we're doing it together. Everyone, like, we're
Cheers.
all connected.
Cheers.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thank
Have a
you.
lovely day.
You too. Bye, everybody. Whoever's here. Mwah.